Matt Chapman might be one of the most underappreciated players in all of Major League Baseball. He's has 2 top 10 MVP finishes, 3 gold gloves, and that will only continue to grow as you can watch these defensive highlights in front of you. Matt Chapman is just a whiz on the defensive side of the ball and kind of rivals Nolan Arenado. Obviously, no one can match Arenado's current prowess, but Matt Chapman's damn close. But he only has 1 All-Star Game appearance, and he really hasn't had a ton of media recognition outside those 2 top 10 MVP finishes in 2018 and 2019. With that being said, he is an incredibly interesting free agent coming into the offseason, and someone the Blue Jays, as they fight for a playoff spot, are really going to try and lean on and use as they go and try and make the postseason in 2023. Chapman was a big part of the A's most recent sell-off, and it makes sense why they would get rid of him when they did. He had 2 years of team control left and was starting to get a little bit of an increase in salary due to arbitration, and he's been an above-average hitter every year he's been in the league based on OPS plus, so might as well capitalize on what you can get out of Chapman and just see what you can get in return, and that's what the Blue Jays did. They traded away 4 prospects for Matt Chapman to be their cornerstone for the next couple of years and potentially even longer if they decide to sign him for a little bit more in free agency this coming offseason. In this video, we're going to go ahead and look back at the trade that happened at the beginning of 2022 that sent Matt Chapman from the Oakland Athletics to the Toronto Blue Jays and evaluate where both teams are now that the trade has had about 2 years to go ahead and materialize and have outcomes be determined. Of course, things aren't completely set in stone yet. Not all of these players have made the majors or had their prospect status completely diminished, so there is some excitement of what could happen to a lot of these players, and we'll go ahead and explore what those outcomes might be. But this trade is far from over, but there is enough evidence to go ahead and reevaluate what people thought was an average trade for both teams and see where teams stand today. Matt Chapman did just hit the injured list with a strained middle finger, so we'll see how he goes towards the playoff push, but the Blue Jays are only 2.5 games out of the AL wildcard, and they're in that 4th slot, so some slipping by Texas, who's been losing quite a few, or Houston could very easily propel the Toronto Blue Jays into the postseason push, where Matt Chapman could go ahead and use some of that playoff experience he has. Granted, it's not very deep, but he has a lot of experience to go ahead and propel a Toronto Blue Jays team potentially deep in the postseason, especially if they match up with a team like Minnesota that isn't going to have a huge push of momentum going into the postseason. Before we get to that video, it'd mean a lot if you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can do that by hitting the baseball in that bottom right corner and going ahead and hitting subscribe. It really means a lot, and you'll find more baseball content like this, analyzing current trades, past trades, and looking at some of the future of baseball, which is the whole point of this channel and the videos that I produce. Thank you. It means a lot. And without further ado, let's talk about what the Blue Jays traded away and what the A's got and how they've fared since this trade has happened. The biggest piece in this trade had to have been Gunnar Hoglund, a left-handed pitcher who the Blue Jays took in the 1st round of the 2021 MLB draft, 19th overall. When you look at what the A's normally get when they trade away their star players, they tend to focus on quantity over quality, and they like to focus on ensuring that the players they get have high upside and potentially are on discounts. Hoglund fit that mold perfectly because at the time of the trade, he was 10 months removed from Tommy John surgery, and although the recovery process from Tommy John does tend to be better as time goes on, it's never 100% sure that a pitcher will be able to recover from that surgery. And Hoglund has a lot of injury histories now after this trade, which we'll talk about in a second, but this is, again, a risky pickup as the star centerpiece of your trade. It was especially frightening because Hoglund was a 1st-round pick by the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2018, but failed his post-draft physical, so he did not end up signing and attended the University of Mississippi instead, and he emerged as one of the best pitchers in the SEC during his time at Ole Miss. The fact he's continuously injured is something that is a big red flag, and that is something that has plagued him even today. After he recovered from Tommy John surgery, he was assigned to the Arizona Complex League and was quickly promoted to Stockton, their single-A affiliate, but only pitched 8 innings before he got shut down with a bicep strain for the rest of the year. In 2023, there's been a similar story of injury as well. Hoglund didn't pitch until basically the end of May in 2023 and has really not looked great during his time in single-A Stockton, pitching to a 7.48 ERA across 43 1/3 innings. So he's really not jumping off the page with his stuff. His walks and hits per inning pitch currently sits slightly above 1.5, which is really not good, especially considering that Hoglund is currently 23, which is very old for single-A. With rookie ball coming to a close, he ended up getting the promotion from single-A to high A to continue that trend. He's only appeared in 1 game so far, but he pitched 5 perfect innings, so maybe things are turning up for Gunnar Hoglund. Granted, it's only 1 game, it's a small sample size, but he is someone that was a centerpiece of this deal, and he can go ahead, get healthy, and turn things around. He could very easily be a 3, 4, 5th starter for a team like the Oakland A's, especially since they don't have a ton of pitching depth. Right now, he's their 19th ranked prospect on MLB Pipeline. At the time of the trade, he ended up slotting to that 7 slot, and he was considered a top 5 prospect in the Blue Jays organization as well when the trade was made. He's most likely to stay as a starter simply because his control is elite. There's no other way to put it. That is part of the reason why he got drafted so highly. His fastball is a little bit above average, his changeup a little bit below average, and his curveball and slider are solid pitches. But the fact that he's able to control those pitches well is what is going to ensure that he stays a starter long term and limits his bullpen appeal to being a low leverage guy. He's not going to be the person who has a wipeout slider or a cutter like Mariano Rivera that can just dominate hitters. If he does end up falling out of a starting role, mostly just to keep him healthy and limit his innings, which I don't think is likely. I think he'll end up at minimum being a back end guy or a swingman at worst, a long reliever. He just doesn't have the wipeout stuff. He doesn't have that dominant pitch that can make him a late innings guy. So there is a little bit of risk there, but he will at least meet, in my opinion, the low end starter role if he can stay healthy. It's a big if, and he has to go ahead and be added to the 40-man roster at the end of 2024. So there is a big if, but if he can go and meet that potential, the A's will have at least a solid return. Granted, we haven't seen that yet. It's not an exciting return, and frankly, Hoglund might be the best part of this deal so far, which is a testament to what's to come and how bad this trade turned out for the A's. But if he can meet that potential, there's a lot to be excited about with Gunnar Hoglund. Another common trend you see with the A's in their trades is they get players that are normally pretty close to the major leagues. Hoglund was the exception in this deal, and Kevin Smith is the only position player they got back in this trade and exemplifies that. He already made his major league debut in 2021 with the Blue Jays, and from there, he just has been a regular guy for the A's. As a matter of fact, he's been very below average offensively. Currently in 2023, his OPS plus sits at 54, which is a really far drop from league average. His OPS right now is 546. He has a negative 0.3 wins above replacement for 2023. So he's really not turning out to be the guy that the A's were hoping for when they made this deal. MLB Pipeline did have him ranked as a top 10 prospect in the Blue Jays organization before the trade and ranked him at 16th after the trade in the Oakland A's organization. So there was some decent prospect pedigree there. He just hasn't been able to live up to those expectations. Right now, he's 27 years old. He has one more minor league option left, so I wouldn't be shocked to see the A's give him another shot next year, especially with some lack of infield depth. But if you look at who they have right now, you look at people like Tyler Soderstrom manning first base. You now have Zach Geloff coming up. Darrell Hernandez is someone who you're most likely to see next year play shortstop. Nick Allen, who was a highly ranked prospect as well, is manning shortstop and battling with Kevin Smith for playing time. Alemdis Diaz is still under contract for 2024 as well, and Jordan Diaz, although he hasn't been the most highly touted prospect, has done really well in the major league so far. So there's a lot of competition in the infield, and I wouldn't be shocked to see Kevin Smith be the odd man out in that organization and have to find a home elsewhere. I think Kevin Smith ends up getting the short end of the stick this offseason in that shuffle, as people like Darrell Hernandez need to be added to the 40-man to protect them from the Rule 5 draft, and I don't see that not happening. His offensive numbers aren't great. I already told you about the OPS being 546. His batting average right now is 191 with a 216 on base percentage, so he's not walking a lot. And his defensive metrics are not great as well. He has a negative total zone, and he had a negative total zone last year. So he's not providing offense. He's not providing defense. What's he providing you but a spot on your 40-man roster that you can give and protect on someone else? I think Kevin Smith is not long for the Oakland A's, and him being one of the better prospects in this deal is something that's kind of sad. You look at what the A's have done, they never hit on these trades, and it is kind of embarrassing that they look to rebuild their roster and they just can't seem to do it. Smith never projected to be an insane offensive provider, but he expected to be league average, and on defense, he was actually expected to be a plus defender, someone you can count on to somewhat replace Matt Chapman. It's hard to do that, as you can see with the defensive highlights, but at least have some kind of effort there, but he really hasn't, and he's really struggled in a big way, and I really do think this is his last time in the Oakland A's uniform. He's currently in their minor leagues at AAA Las Vegas, and I don't think he's going to make it. Should the team move to Las Vegas, he's going to have to find a different home. The A's also have an affinity for former Florida Gators. You look at A.J. Puck and Richie Martin and J.J. Schwartz, who they all drafted. They had Buddy Reed signed in their minor league system for a couple years. They love what the Florida Gators produce, and it makes sense. They're one of the best college baseball teams in the country, and they produce quality talent every year. As for Kirby Snead, who was another player who had already made their major league debut, comes in as a reliever to go and help make this Oakland A's team better. Last year, he really did not do a great job of that. He pitched a 5.84 ERA, really struggled, and his whip sat at a very, very ugly 1.75 in 2022. So he did not have a great year, and that was a little unfortunate because in 2021, he looked really good. He had a 1.175 whip, a fielding independent pitching, which basically removes the impact of errors and positioning of defenders and gives you an ERA-like number of 2.52, which is really good. And in 2022, that jumped up to 4.61, so not great. But in 2023, granted a limited sample size of 9.1 innings, it seems to have come around a little bit. His whip is down dramatically to 1.07. He has a 1.93 ERA, and although that FIP is a little high, hovering around 4, he's been solid at the very least, and someone who they've been starting to pitch in high leverage roles in that 7th and 8th inning. So if he can go and be that late inning guy to help a Trevor May this year, and maybe Lucas Erceg in the future, I think the A's got a decent player out of this. Matt Chapman's value, I think, is a lot more than what Kirby Snead is providing. Right now, his career WAR is just negative 0.2. It's 0.3 this year, so he's getting better. And WAR is a little finicky, especially with relief pitchers, but there's not much you can do and say about this besides they got a decent reliever who maybe wouldn't be in a high leverage role on another team, but is because the Oakland A's are the Oakland A's. He'll be solid. He'll be an okay pitcher, and it's someone that will probably be in the green and gold for a little bit. Maybe he gets shipped off right near the end of his contract, as most players do when they're in Oakland A, but he's been okay. That's the best way to say it. Kirby Snead has been okay, and it's someone who, if the A's want to put him in a closer role, give him a shot once Trevor May leaves next year, I wouldn't hate it, especially with the roster construction they have now, but he's not somebody really excited about. He is a left-hander, and that's probably the only thing that's a big plus about him. He has an okay fastball, an okay slider, an okay changeup. His command's okay. That's all I can really say about Snead right now. He could be a good bulk innings guy, so if you have someone you want to pitch maybe the 6th and 7th inning, that could be him in the long term. But it's just not something to get super, super excited about. He's already 29 years old, so he's kind of getting towards the end of his developmental cycle. He's just going to be a good reliever. That's probably his peak, and that's what the A's are going to end up getting back from Matt Chapman. A good reliever, a starting pitcher who's injured a ton, and a second baseman. But there's still one more player we need to talk about, and we'll go ahead and address why I didn't include them in that short list just a second ago. The final player the A's acquired was someone who also had a little bit of prospect pedigree, more than Kirby Snead did, but was still drafted kind of late, the 9th round of 2017 out of Kentucky, and that's Zack Logue, who isn't even on the Oakland A's roster anymore. That's right. He hasn't played an inning with the Oakland A's in 2023, even though he was just acquired for one of their biggest superstars to the start of 2022. I really like a word that both MLB Pipeline and Fangraphs used to describe Logue as a prospect, and that was solid. He's someone who wasn't going to blow you away with his stuff. He had a decent cutter, and he had a pretty solid changeup, but everything else was just okay. His control was okay, but he was going to be a decent pitcher, you'd like to hope. And that's what the A's were banking on, someone who could eat innings and be a solid player. During his time at the University of Kentucky, he pitched out of the bullpen and started, so he had that kind of flexibility. But as of right now, he is solely a bullpen piece. I hesitate to call players bad because they're doing things that I have no chance of ever doing. I think my ERA in the major leagues would probably be close to 30, so I can't hate too much, but it's a far stretch to not call Zack Logue a bad player, especially in 2022 with the Oakland A's. It's a 3-8 record, a 6.79 ERA, a ERA plus of 55, which is really bad for someone who was starting a lot of the time. A FIP, again, fielding independent pitching, above 5.5, and a walks and hits per inning pitch above 1.5 as well. He just was not doing well at all. He got designated for assignment by the Oakland A's at the end of the 2022 season, and the Detroit Tigers put a claim on him, and he hasn't done great there as well. He pitched to a 7.36 ERA so far in 2023, solely coming out of the bullpen in 3 games. He has 11 innings pitched, so he's a bulk reliever, but his numbers have largely remained the same. He ended up being designated for assignment twice by the Detroit Tigers during that time period. He's currently in their minor league system off of the 40-man roster. So I think it's fair to say that, well, it's already happened that he's no longer with the A's. That part of the trade is a bust, but I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see Zack Logue again in the major leagues during his entire career. Granted, it's always helpful to have guys who have experience be in the minor leagues and be that quadruple A guy who, had some experience in the minor leagues and the major leagues and wasn't successful but can do really well in AAA. That can be beneficial to a team and development-wise, but Zack Logue is not going to be someone I would want to see come out if my team has a lead, to say the very least. Now that it's been about 2 years since this trade has gone down, we can use a little bit of revisionist history and see exactly how this trade would grade out today. Granted, Gunnar Hoglund hasn't made the major leagues. He hasn't cracked above high A yet, so it's really hard to tell exactly what he'll end up being, But for the benefit of Oakland A's fans, because right now they kind of need anything they can get, we'll go ahead and assume he reaches his potential of maybe being a solid fourth starter, someone who can go eat some innings, have a couple good outings, maybe a couple bad ones, but has potential to be a guy who, when you see him on your lineup card, you're not super disappointed. You're saying, we can win this game. And I think that's exactly what Gunnar Hoglund is going to end up being. May he not reach the major leagues at all? Potentially, but we're going to assume that that is what he ends up being. Looking back at trade grades, or a lot of average grades for both sides of this deal, when you looked at the Blue Jays side, people were worried that Matt Chapman would reach his maximum offensive potential in Toronto, that he would kind of stall where he was, and that did not end up being the case. You can look at the start of 2023 as an example. He tore up the month of April, but he has kind of slowed down a little bit since. Now he's injured, and if the Blue Jays don't go on and win at least a playoff series, this investment is going to be for nothing. Granted, they didn't invest a whole lot to get him. Obviously, at the time, they traded a decent amount, but it looks like those stocks ended up being really bad and not something the A's really should have cashed in on. You can look this throughout all of A's history. They have never really gone and gotten the players they need to in trades. They have a lot of misses. You look back at, the Josh Donaldson trade. They could have gotten Noah Syndergaard. Granted, he's DFA'd now, but he was great for a lot of years. You can look back and say, well, they really haven't hit well on their prospects, and this is another great example. I think for the Blue Jays, a B grade is probably fair, especially if they make the playoffs and get bounced in the wild card or in the divisional series. I think that's a fair grade for them. Matt Chapman was definitely a win now move, and for a team like the Blue Jays, you might as well win now when you have your core of Vladdy Jr., Bo Bichette, and George Springer going and entering the prime of their career. Springer near the end of it, but go ahead and compete for a championship now. If you look at Matt Chapman's WAR, he's already produced 7.5 Baseball Reference WAR and 7.4 Fangraphs WAR in his time in Toronto. So that's something that is definitely a big sign of improvement there, and something that, as a Blue Jays fan, you made a good investment. He has contributed positively to your team, and that wasn't a surprise. That's what everyone expected with him going to Toronto. For the A's, it's a very different story. When you look at their Baseball Reference WAR, it's negative 1.5 total throughout their careers. Their Fangraphs WAR is negative 1.2 for their entire careers, so we're not looking at a lot of great players. So as a matter of fact, all three players who have made the major leagues, and Smith, Logue, and Snead all have negative Fangraphs WAR throughout their time in Oakland. So it's really not looking great on this trade. Again, Logue is already gone out of the Oakland A's system, and he's not on the Tigers 40-man. The Tigers are another middling team, so I don't expect him to be a big contributor. Snead's been okay, and I expect Smith to be off the team by next year. So really the only saving grace for this is if Gunnar Hoglund can, by some miracle, put everything together. I don't think that happens. I really hate it for A's fans. As someone who is an A's fan myself, it's really tough to see someone like Matt Chapman, who is a fan favorite, get traded for pennies on the dollar, and those pennies not turn into anything significant. It sucks, but sometimes that's all you can do is hope, pray, and sell the team. With that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. If you did like this content, there's going to be a couple more videos that pop up on the side of the screen, as well as that baseball there in that center. Go ahead and hit that, hit subscribe. It really means a lot for a channel like mine to grow. And if you like more baseball content, there's going to be more on the way, whether it's trade analysis of things that have already happened, trades that are going to be happening on the horizon, or just general prospect news and excitement about the future of Major League Baseball. This is the channel for you. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you soon.